This is Mifeprex. It's also known as the abortion pill. You can't get this drug at a pharmacy. In fact, for the last 20 years, the FDA has treated it like one of the most dangerous drugs on the market, while at the same time saying it's safe and effective. So we wanted to know why Mifeprex, a drug that has a better safety record than penicillin and Viagra, is more restricted than opioids like fentanyl, and what the restrictions on Mifeprex mean for patients who are trying to access the drug.
This is a very safe and effective method of abortion.
These women who are having abortions are otherwise healthy women who were pregnant and now they're dead.
I would like to provide medication abortions to my patients just by writing a prescription.
I did not think it would be this difficult for me to obtain a medical abortion.
The abortion pill has a long and complicated history that actually began in the 1980s.
Either RU-486 is a marvelous breakthrough or a horrible mistake.
It was developed in France as RU-486, and in the US, the reaction was immediate.
RU-486 is a death pill designed to kill unborn babies.
This drug is highly safe and effective as an abortifacient.
Politics kept the drug out of the US market, but by the 1990s, politics helped bring it in.
RU-486 has been held hostage to politics.
I specialize in maternal child health and family planning, and I work for the Population Council.
Dr. Beverly Winnicott was there at the beginning. She worked for the organization trying to bring the abortion pill to the US.
This is a revolutionary technology that women could take a pill and have an abortion. Think about that. You don't need a sterilization of a hypodermic needle. You don't need a surgeon. You don't need any kind of anesthesia.
The abortion pill is the first drug taken to begin a medication abortion by blocking a hormone that maintains a pregnancy. A second drug then expels the pregnancy, completing the abortion.
That's what happened
at the time, the politics surrounding abortion turned violent. Clinics were bombed, providers killed, and even the FDA felt threatened.
The FDA was treating it like a hot potato. I think there were a lot of expectations, but there was an immediate knowledge that everyone who touched this drug was afraid.
Finally, in 2000, the FDA announced that Mifeprex would go to market. But the drug would not be available at pharmacies with a prescription. That's because the FDA wanted to monitor its safety.
It goes back to the fears of the FDA, and it was an honest effort, I think, on their part, but, it was part of their regulatory oversight.
Today, we know a lot more about the safety of Mifeprex for medication abortion. The FDA has a database that tracks complications, side effects, and even deaths after a drug is taken. In the last 20 years, about 3.7 million women in the US have had a medication abortion. Since that time, the FDA has records of 24 women who have died after taking the abortion pill, which means for every 1 million patients who took the drug, 6.5 died.
Well, these are women that were normal, healthy, pregnant, and then they're dead. I mean, it's a procedure like any other procedure that has complications at a known rate, and the complications can be very serious, and sometimes they can kill women. And I think to say anything less is to be dishonest with women.
But when you take a closer look, none of the 24 deaths can be causally attributed to Mifeprex. In other words, there's no direct link between taking the pill and dying. And nearly half of those deaths are associated with things like homicide, suicide, drug abuse, and emphysema. There have been millions of women who have had a medication abortion. None of those deaths have been directly correlated to a medication abortion.
They weren't dying before they took the drug, or else they shouldn't have been given the drug. The problem is that is a minimal number. So we have no way in this country of tracking the complications from Mifeprex abortions.
Serious complications from medication abortions are rare. The latest report from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine found infection, hospitalization, and hemorrhage requiring transfusions occur in fewer than 1% of patients. In your opinion, what would make a medication abortion safe?
Not doing it. Not doing a medication abortion would make it safe, because it's certainly not safe for the unborn child, and it has real risks for the mom.
But, she says, as long as medication abortions are an option,
I would love to see FDA actually do its job in monitoring the safety of this drug. I think the FDA has been deficient in its oversight of this drug post-marketing.
the FDA acknowledges its reporting system is not perfect, but they use data from this database to help regulate all drugs.
It's really very safe and effective. It's extremely rare to have a bad outcome, more rare than with most other approved drugs.
We wanted to find out how the death rate of Mifeprex compared to the death rate of similar drugs. Like Mifeprex, erectile dysfunction drugs are generally given to healthy people and deal with reproductive health. Data from one study show that the death rate for erectile dysfunction drugs are actually 4 times greater than for Mifeprex. But unlike the abortion pill, erectile dysfunction drugs are sold at a pharmacy with a prescription.
Why can't you pick this pill up in a pharmacy? Exactly what is more dangerous about picking a pill up in a pharmacy than having somebody give it to you in a clinic and you take it home and you swallow it?
So despite what the FDA's own data shows, they say that Mifeprex is too risky to be sold at a pharmacy with a prescription. So risky that they've actually placed the drug in one of their special programs for the riskiest drugs. That program is called REMS, or Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategies. So the only way a patient can get Mifeprex is if they find a certified healthcare provider and go to their office to get the pill.
Once you have a positive pregnancy test staring you down in the face and you just have this dread, you feel every kind of emotion. Most are not good if it's not wanted.
In 2018, S found out she was pregnant.
My husband was very, very supportive the entire time. We were up pretty much all night deciding what we were gonna do.
It was an unplanned pregnancy, and for S, surgical abortion wasn't an option. We're using her first initial because she fears retaliation from her family who disapprove of abortion.
With the horrible, horrible experience I had giving birth to my daughter, I mean, I couldn't even mentally handle going through a cervical check. So I wanted to do a medical, if at all possible. I didn't know any of the processes. I didn't know anything about the laws. What I knew was very, very limited.
But she did know that medication abortions are only available within the first 10 weeks of a pregnancy, so she knew the clock was ticking.
New Orleans, Planned Parenthood would be the closest to us.
There were other clinics in Louisiana and Alabama that were close, but they didn't provide medication abortion. So their last option was Mississippi's only abortion clinic in Jackson, which was 3 hours away.
I felt like nobody was gonna be able to help me. I was just so scared of that happening.
Another week went by before S could go to her first appointment.
I still had that anxiety about oh no, what if it's a freak thing? I'm that 1 in a million where I'm way further along than I should be and I can't get any help.
As a distraction, she treated the drive like a road trip.
Started playing music, point out weird billboards, that kind of thing.
They pulled into the clinic parking lot and headed in to meet the doctor.
I went in for my ultrasound. She told me I was 4 to 5 weeks, so I caught it very, very early. Instantly, it was a weight was lifted off my shoulders because I was okay, I can do a medical abortion.
S didn't get her pills on that first visit. That's because on top of the FDA restrictions, Mississippi has a 24-hour waiting period for all abortions.
We could not afford it to be able to go immediately the next day either. Money was an issue and, travel time. My husband had to take off work.
S had to wait 2 more weeks to get Mifeprex. Now, Mifeprex is not the only drug in the US that you can't get at a pharmacy. There are actually 14 of them, and they all have serious side effects that can occur immediately. Things like seizures, heart attack, plummeting blood pressure, and even overdoses, which is why the FDA requires all of these drugs to be administered by a healthcare provider except Mifeprex. We actually found that Mifeprex is the only one that a patient can take on their own. What the FDA has said about the safety of Mifeprex, well, it's confusing. For example, from one medical review in 2016, the FDA wrote, The safety profile of Mifeprex is well characterized, that no new safety concerns have arisen in recent years, and that the known serious risks occur rarely. No one from the FDA would speak to us on camera, but when we asked why the drug still isn't available at pharmacies, they wrote in an email, certain restrictions continue to be necessary to ensure the safe use of the drug.
There's a time when you can understand the regulatory agency is excessively cautious, but it's 20 years on and 3.5 million people later. And so now's the time to be realistic and say, what are we doing?
In 2016, the FDA did relax some of the restrictions on the abortion pill. In addition to doctors, nurse practitioners, and certified midwives are now allowed to dispense the pill, as long as their employer will let them.
I would like to provide medication abortions to my patients just by writing a prescription.
Dr. Graham Chilius is a family physician focusing on women's health on the small, rural Hawaiian island of Kauai. There are no abortion providers on this island. Women here have to take a plane to another island to get the abortion pill.
Women who have plenty of time to initiate a medication abortion sometimes miss out on that window, and it's so difficult and so complicated for them that they end up carrying a pregnancy to term.
So how does this affect your ability to serve and service your patients?
Well, unfortunately, because of the restrictions, I don't provide medication abortions in my practice.
By placing Mifeprex in that special program for risky drugs, remember REMS, the FDA requires Dr. Chilius to stock the abortion pill in his office, which means he has to get permission from his employer.
I work for a healthcare system, and so I just can't say, we're just going to stock this medicine. It has to go through a pharmacy and therapeutics committee to put it on the formulary, and then there has to be a purchasing contract between my facility and the manufacturer of the drug, and there needs to be policies put in place of how to store the medicine and who's allowed to get it and where it's stored and who's purchasing it, and it's a bureaucracy. That's why we're seeking to have the REMS removed.
Dr. Chilius is part of a federal lawsuit against the FDA. He wants Mifeprex removed from the REMS program so his patients can get it from a pharmacy.
There doesn't seem to be any reason why Mifeprex was singled out, other than the fact that it's for a somewhat controversial type of medical care, which is legal in this country.
The FDA acknowledges the REMS program can add some additional burden, but they also say they try to make the requirements the least burdensome they can possibly be.
Not everybody has access to transportation. Not everybody has the ability to just take time off work. And while for somebody who has a lot of resources, the Mifeprex REMS may not create an insurmountable barrier, for a lot of patients, it does create an insurmountable barrier, and we think it's an unconstitutional restriction on abortions.
S was 7 weeks pregnant by the time she could make another 3-hour drive to Jackson.
I actually smiled when we pulled into the parking lot because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to feel better now. They had the doctor come in and she introduced herself and went over the procedure and the side effects and everything. And then they gave us the first pill, which is the hormone blocker. And once we took that, we were able to leave.
S went home and 24 hours later took the second drug.
Sometime during that night, I definitely know when I passed the pregnancy. And then from there on, it was just like a very, very heavy period after that.
In the span of 7 weeks, S and her husband drove nearly 14 hours and over 780 miles to get the abortion pill.
If you're looking at your options for terminating a pregnancy and you look at medical and surgical, that can be really traumatizing to not even be able to make that choice.
They need to reevaluate the balance, because the burden is clearly not worth what these regulations are causing. The FDA is there to protect the people who take drugs, the consumer, and they do a very good job, but there's sometimes that you have to move back and say, wait, this may have been okay at the beginning, but now it's past its lifespan and we have to move on.